Now to weigh in, House Financial Services Committee member, Congressman David Kustoff of Tennessee. And Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Maria. Thank you very much.
What are you looking for mostly to solicit from Janet Yellen today?
Well, a number of things. One is I do want to hear her position on housing reform, want to hear the position on where she thinks the Fed is going to go in terms of interest rate hikes, and also in terms of lending money, community banks being able to lend money more freely, banks being able to lend money more freely, where the economy is going. Now, I have been able to hear her in one prior session earlier this year. I heard the chair say that we were at full employment or near full employment. I expect her to probably say that again today. I would take issue with that because I see in my district, a lot of part of my district had been stagnant or close to stagnant since the 07, 08, 09 recession. We're not at full employment or near full employment where I come from.
Yeah, it's a really good point because we look at the numbers every day as well. And when you look at tax receipts, they're pretty weak, weaker than people expected. So maybe the numbers are showing real euphoria in this economy, but it's really not so when you go to districts like yours. Look, she's going to be speaking to your committee today. So we want to get a sense of what you're most focused on. And the economic story is certainly important. Do you think that she should change her expectations of raising interest rates? I mean, if she continues to raise interest rates, is that going to dampen the economic traction that we've seen, even if it's just a bit?
It could. And I do want to hear her testimony. It's interesting that you put it in perspective like that, because the last 5, 6, 7 years, the Obama presidency, we saw virtually no economic growth or very slow economic growth. We all know that. With Donald Trump's election, the expectations completely changed, and we have seen a stronger economy. So I think a lot of economists believe that we will see an interest rate hike probably late this year, around December. I do want to hear her thoughts on that. As you know, and you've seen enough and covered enough of these hearings, it's pretty well scripted. Her answers are drafted to the questions that she suspects that we're going to ask. But let's see if we can nudge her a little bit to see if, in fact, that is what the Fed is thinking, and that is the best course of action.
Yeah, Congressman, it's Kevin Kelly. I'm glad you're talking about the interest rate hike, and we led off this segment with they have a $4.5 trillion balance sheet. When they start to unwind that, rates will go up. The problem I have with this is that you have the Fed intervening in the free markets, artificially suppressed interest rates, and now the market is addicted to those artificially low rates. And once they start to rise, it could have devastating effects on the economy because it hasn't trickled through to small businesses. How do you feel about the Fed having a balance sheet, intervening into free markets, and basically artificially suppressing rates? Are you going to push her on this, saying, hey, the Fed shouldn't be doing this? It's up to Congress to enact fiscal policies.
Well, I'm concerned. I think you hit that point exactly right. I'm concerned about the assets on the Fed's balance sheet. They do need to get those assets off their balance sheet. And then you talk about small business. And again, take my area. I'm from Tennessee. I'm from the western part of Tennessee. We have a really good, strong network of community banks. They want to be able to start lending again. They've been stagnated because of the rules of the Fed, because of the CFPB, because of Dodd-Frank. Of course, last month we rolled back a lot of Dodd-Frank in the Choice Act that we passed out of the House. That will give smaller banks, community banks, larger banks the opportunity to begin lending again to these small businesses. But the Fed has to start getting these assets off their balance sheet.
Let me just ask you, Congressman, because the central banks, all the central banks led by the Fed, are preparing to reverse this massive asset purchases that we've been seeing over the last several years. And the Fed's balance sheet is $4.5 trillion, as Kevin just pointed out. Right. I want to add on to what Kevin just said, because yesterday, here's what Jamie Dimon, the chairman and CEO of J.P. Morgan, said. When that happens of size or substance, it could be a little more disruptive than people think, Jamie Dimon said. We act like we know exactly what's going to happen, and we don't. it could be disruptive to markets as they unwind the $4.5 trillion. Do you expect a market disruption?
No, and I think that from what the Fed has indicated, number one, they will start getting these assets off their balance sheet, but they're going to do it right or wrong. They're going to do it in a slower fashion, and I don't think if they do it in that manner that we'll see the disruption that some economists might think will happen once the Fed does release those assets.
Here's Mike Murphy.
Congressman Mike Murphy here. My concern with unwinding this balance sheet is that it's being overseen by people who just don't have markets experience, by the Fed, by Janet Yellen. I was wondering if you're going to press on the fact that they need someone like a Jamie Dimon, someone with markets experience to help them in this. We've never been in this position before. Yet, of course, we need to unwind the balance sheet. But we need to have someone overseeing this, I think, that actually understands the mechanisms from and boots on the ground perspective of how to do it. Will you press her on that or recommend that?
Yeah, we'll have a limited amount of time for questions this morning. That's one area that we're concerned about because, as you pointed out, the bureaucrats of the Fed are strictly that. They are bureaucrats. A lot of them do not have that professional, real-world experience. Of course, you see a lot of that in Washington in various positions and in various jobs. So it is important to have people with real-world experience helping to oversee that process.
Yes, speaking of experience, look, this is going to be Janet Yellen's last congressional testimony before her actual term ends in February. And now we're hearing National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn wants the job, or he's reportedly now the leading candidate to succeed her. Do you think Cohn would be a good pick for chairman of the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, of course, those stories started coming out, I guess, yesterday or last evening. The president should have the right to appoint whoever he wants to appoint to govern the Fed, whether that's Gary Cohn, whether that's Janet Yellen, whether that's somebody else. I've had a limited amount of exposure with Gary Cohn by virtue of being on this committee. I'm impressed, and I think that for the most part, he has given the president good counsel in terms of how the overall operation of the economy should function. I've been very pleased these first 6 months.
Yeah, okay. Rachel.
Congressman, this is Rachel Campos Duffy. My husband, by the way, Sean Duffy, will be at that committee hearing with you on financial services. Right. You mentioned Cohen, Maria, but some people are saying that maybe Donald Trump might keep Yellen. And is there anything that she can say, or is there any, tone difference or something she can do to keep her job?
Well, first of all, I really respect your husband. He does a good job, does a good job on the committee and a good job chairing his subcommittee. There's one other question that we need to ask it, and that is, does she want to serve another term? And we don't know the answer to that. I would like to see her pressed on that today, whether, number one, she does want to be reappointed to another four-year term, whether she expects to, and whether she's had any discussions with the president on that. I suspect, as scripted as these answers will be today, that we won't hear very much in the way of that, but hopefully she will be asked about that
Congressman,
today.
do you agree with her plan so far to raise rates in the manner she has?
I think we have to be very cautious about that. We all know that these rates have been artificially low for some period of time. I think that the market, we need to see the market forces operate, but we've been at an artificially low level for a very long period of time, and it's just not conducive, I think, for the market.
So it's time. Let me turn to politics, sir. Donald Trump Jr. is telling Fox News that he probably should have handled things differently when a meeting last year with a Kremlin-linked lawyer came up. Of course, she promised him damaging information about Hillary Clinton. Listen to Donald Trump Jr.'s response.
In retrospect, I probably would have done things a little differently. Again, this is before the Russia mania. This is before they were building it up in the press. For me, this was opposition research. They had something, maybe concrete evidence to all the stories I'd been hearing about, but they were probably underreported for, years, not just during the campaign. So I think I wanted to hear it out. But really, it went nowhere, and it was apparent that that wasn't what the meeting was actually about.
So now some Democrats, including Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton, are crying treason. He tweeted this out. If this isn't treasonous, I'm not sure what is. Your reaction to this treason accusation, sir, from your Democratic colleagues?
Yeah, and not much. And I've got to tell you that to coin a phrase from our Speaker, Paul Ryan, that we in Congress are able to focus on what we want to focus on, this important legislation, whether it's health care, whether it's Dodd-Frank reform, tax reform.
Right.
We're able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have investigators, we have committees in the House and the Senate that I'm sure are going to look into all these allegations. If there's anything there, we'll hear about it. But frankly, I was impressed yesterday that Donald Trump Jr. released what appeared to be his entire chain of emails going back and forth from last summer. And from my standpoint, it didn't look like there was anything that was there.
Real quick, so you think you're going to get the agenda done? Are you confident you'll get health care and taxes done this year then? You and your colleagues?
Yeah, I think we've got to, because we're at a unique time. And you think about where we are in our history, having a president of the same party, a House and the Senate. And Maria, when I campaigned last year, all I heard about was repeal and replace Obama.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we're talking about every day. Congressman, good to see you, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria.
David Kustoff. We'll be watching this afternoon. We'll be right back.